I was talking to a pastor friend of mine this week, and we were talking about the fact that I don't go to a church. Um, and it's an interesting question because most people think that if you are a Christian, that's a big part of your life. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I can explain it all. But when I asked God what he would have me do, and this is just for me, I'm not asking anybody else to do anything differently, but for our family, God said, "I want you to stop going to church. I want you to be the church, and you don't need a group of people or a religious organization to access me, to have a relationship with me." And it pisses me off to think about the fact that people believe that they have to go somewhere to experience God. Now tell me how that makes sense. Tell me how that makes sense. We invite somebody to a God that we say, because of him, not because of us, because of Jesus, not because of us, you can have direct access to the creator of the universe. You don't need us. We invite people to that. I believe that's truth. I believe the whole world needs to hear that. But we invite people to this and we say you can have direct access. And then, by the way, once you've accepted that, we hand them a freaking manual and basically say, now it's time to join our religious organization. And you got to show up every weekend and you got to show up during the week and you got to do these service projects and you got to give your money and you got to give your time. I'm not trying to shut down churches. I want to be clear on that. Like they're many churches are great organizations and communities and they bring people together, but it is no different than Kiwanis Club or any other club. And quite frankly, it's not any different than a club that atheists could have. I mean, like, how is it different? Just because you use the name of God and say, well, we're a place. What is it about going to a building? What is it about a building that's different in what you can do and how you can talk to God and experience God? What is it? The answer is you don't know. You don't know. It's to me, it's in the Bible. I mean, by the way, look at Matthew 23. If you want to use the Bible as your source of what Jesus would do, WWJD, look at Matthew 23. And if you think that doesn't apply to religious organizations today, you're a fool. It does. He goes on, he talks about how basically what we're talking about now, you've taken all this stuff and you've made it about you're the mouthpiece. You're the place where people have to go to get it. And yet you're preaching God is the answer to everything. God is who we're trying to bring people to. And you're bringing people into your church and Jesus actually said, but somehow we gloss over it and as a church, as religious organizations, we just exclude ourselves from this. That Jesus said, you get people in. This is what I just said. You get people in, you get them to get excited about me and accept me, and then you make them twice the sons of hell that they were before they got in. Got into what? Got into your church, got into your religious organization. And I'm just saying it's time that we reevaluate what it is we're doing. I'm not, again, trying to shut down churches. I think many of them are great spots for people to enjoy a community, do some good things, serve those that, but why do I need a fucking church to tell me that I need to serve my neighbor, love my family, love my wife, spend time with God Monday through Saturday? Why is it that I have to go to Sunday to hear from to a church and hear from God? Why can't I hear from God anywhere? The answer is I can. That's the most offensive thing to religion is Jesus came and said, never needed you, and especially don't need you now. And I'm going to show that to you. But religion loses control when it comes to that. And so, of course, they have to preach this gospel with an and on the end. You can receive this free gift and you can be my child. And by the way, that invitation is to anybody. Anybody. The invitation was not that you get to come to our building and be a part of our little religious organization. That's not the invitation. And I think most churches would agree on that. Most pastors would agree on. By the way, another thing that Jesus said is don't call anybody rabbi, don't call anybody father. There's only one. And it talks about how these rabbis and these leaders, they loved the accolades that came along with being called father and pastor and rabbi. It's in the Bible, read it. So why do we suddenly act like it's different? Like now we're somehow different than the same religious leaders and organizations that Jesus was talking to then. He was giving freedom and they hated it. And they hate it now. And I get it. What I'm talking about right now is not gonna be popular with religious leaders, and of course, they're gonna try to take it all kinds of ways, and they're gonna call me a heretic, and they're gonna call me somebody who doesn't love God, a son of the devil, whatever it is, but they did the same thing to Jesus, and they did the same thing to John the Baptist, and they did the same thing to Paul, and they did it to anybody who would actually talk about this, and talk about freedom, and talk about the lack of religion, and so I'm okay with that. I'm in good company. And I think the world needs to hear that God invites us to an intimate relationship with us. That didn't make any sense. God invites us to an intimate relationship with Him. Can you imagine being in a marriage or intimate relationship with somebody that required going somewhere to have that relationship? It wouldn't make any sense. We'd be like, that doesn't make any sense. Can you imagine a relationship that all I ever did was read? Like, if all I ever did was read about Lulu, I never actually talked to her, and then I met in a building to talk about her, but I never actually spent any one-on-one time with her, guess what? We'd be divorced. That's just not how that works. It's the same thing with God. He's calling us. The whole point of why why Jesus came to earth was to show us how intimate He wanted to be with us. That God is actually He's our true soulmate. And to say, "Hey, you don't need other people. You don't need the oppression of religion." Think about the fact that when we invite people into religion, we say that they're gonna get saved. And you say, "Saved from what?" "Well, saved from their sinful lifestyle where they're, drinking and drugging and, rock and roll and sex and all these things." And it's like, "Well, wow, yeah, we need to be saved." And the thing is, it kinda works because people feel empty with those things, and there's a good reason why you feel empty. 'Cause it is empty. But you kind of already know that. So we invite you into this church and we say, basically, we're going to save you. And then all that happens when you do that is you bring people in, and of course, they hear truth. Truth is this, that Jesus wants to save us. He wants to have intimacy with us. That part's true. They got that right, and people accept it, and they go, "I need that. I want that." And then we start adding on to it. And so the very anxiety and fear and worry and misery and lack of fulfillment and lack of joy that we're calling people out of, we bring it back to them. Like as Jesus said in Matthew 23, we make them twice the sons of the devil. We give them twice the worry, anxiety, and fear because now we've called them in this thing where they've got to perform, and you start out, here's how it works. You come into a church, you become a Christian, you accept it, and then you join and you become a member, and they start asking you, hey, now you need to give your money to us. We'll start you out in the parking lot. You can be in the parking lot crew or maybe be one of the greeters. And then as you work your way up, maybe you can be a Sunday school teacher. Maybe you could even be on a worship team and you could lead worship. And then at some point, maybe you can be part of our elite prayer circle. And then maybe you can be part of the super elite prayer circle. And then maybe one day you'll be able to speak in tongues, be like us. And then if you're really cool and God really favors you and you really commit your time and money to our religious organization, maybe one day you'll be able to heal somebody. Wow, wouldn't that be something? While we're talking about it, by the way, this is something I asked God about recently. I was sitting in an airport and I said, God, it would be so cool if I could heal people. And you know what he said to me? You can. He said, what are you asking me? Be honest." I said, "Well, I really would just like people to think I'm cool." And God said, "Thanks for your honesty." You just said that out loud, by the way. He said, "You can already do it. Why do you need to do that publicly? Why do you need to have a healing service? Why do you need to get up in front of people and ask them if they've been healed or if they've at least been 50% healed or 25% healed? Why do you do that? Why do you need to do that? What if I told you that you could pray over people and you could ask me to heal them and I would do that?" I said, "Well, that would be pretty cool." He said, "But here's the thing, you're not going to get any credit for it." I said, "Give me some time to think about that." No, I'm kidding. I was like, "I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, wow." And then he actually said, "Well, now remember what I told you? I made it really simple." In fact, Lulu and I were sitting out in the carport, and that's our little fancy outdoor space that we like to sit. And he really showed me. He said, "Well, healing somebody, you talking about physically?" I said, "Well, yeah. I mean, it'd be cool, like, if somebody had some physical ailment that I could just go and lay hands on them and they'd be healed." And he said, "Well, that is cool. I did that. But what if you could be a part of healing their heart?" And I was like, "Well, that would be even cooler. That would be." And he said, "Remember when I said to love me, like, with all your heart, soul, and mind? And then the second thing, the commandments like that. And I said, hey, love others the way I've loved you. And if you do that, you're gonna see people healed. By the way, Dean, you're already doing that." And so when we ask God to show us and reveal places that are religious versus what he intended, he's gonna show you, by the way. So so why do we have to have these big public healing services? Why do people have to make public spectacles of speaking in tongues or whatever it is that you think is going to impress somebody and make them think you're a better Christian than they are? The reason is it's man-centered. I don't care how you wanna try to combat what I'm saying. First of all, you gotta go through God before you get to me. You're gonna have to argue with what God says in the Bible that you say you believe. You're gonna have to argue with that first. And once you've done that, then I guess you can come after me, but all I'm doing is just I'm telling you what's in there. But you don't wanna let go of that. You don't wanna include yourself in the category of snakes in wolves in sheep's clothing. Because you're pastors and you're on staffs of churches that do amazing things, and you guys are the mouthpiece of God. And I was in that. Ask me how I know. I speak as one who has authority because I was in it. I was raised in it. And I'm grateful for what I was raised in. I had a great family. I have a lot of great friends that I met in churches in places like that. But let's just call it what it is. It is not anything more special than anything else. It's not more special than meeting with people and playing golf on a Sunday. Oh my gosh. I mean, I know this is gonna be torn apart by people who say you can't compare church to playing a round of golf with your friends on a Sunday, and I say, "Tell me why. I have to go to your building? I have to go hear your speaker, your pastor? I have to do that to experience fellowship with God? Isn't that kind of flying in the face of what you're calling everyone to? Isn't that supposed to be the whole purpose and mission of your church in the first place? And yet I can't go and be with my wife on a Sunday and play a round of disc golf or just be with her here and drink an extra couple coffees and have brunch and be in God's presence? You have something different to offer than that? The answer is no, you don't. It's just time that we start calling that out and we start calling out the emptiness of all that, just like Jesus did. Again, not trying to shut down churches, but Can you imagine what would happen, the revival that would take place if churches started actually preaching Jesus' words and saying, "We are guilty of this"? People would be drawn to that. You want people to come in and have something meaningful? Start preaching the actual words of Jesus. Call it out. People will be drawn to that just like they were when Jesus spoke those words. The only people that got pissed off about Jesus were people who were religious. They were offended. They were offended at how much Jesus loved everybody in the world and how he showed attention and care and how he actually hung out with people who weren't religious, who didn't darken the door of a synagogue. It's no different now. We call people who, when they don't go to church. I was there. I was a guy who did that. I pointed my finger at people who didn't go to church and I questioned them. I mean, even worse, I was questioning people who went to other churches who said they believed the same way I did, but because they went to the movies or they allowed their church members to listen to rock music or drink alcohol, they weren't going to heaven one day. They were going to hell. I mean, that was literally what I said. I pointed my finger along with the other religious idiots that I was associated with, and I did that. So this is not like I'm sitting here from the outside in saying, this is what I've observed. I'm telling you as somebody who, and by the way, fast forward to when I needed God the most, when I needed forgiveness and healing and love the most, I got shunned by that church. Unless you think I'm angry about that, like I'm bitter against the church, I'm not. I'm actually thankful for it. Who would have thought the one thing that would have brought me closer to God to actually begin to fully comprehend what he is, who he is, and what he wants with me was to get out of the church, to stop leading worship at a church, to stop being in the inner sanctum of the leadership of that church. Again, nothing against those people, but God called me out through a series of horrific things that I got into and got involved in, destroying my life. And when I finally raised my hand and said, "Hey, I need help. I need love. I need forgiveness," I was shunned. And that was the beginning of really finally starting to see like, okay, well well, God, if that's what else do I have left? I mean, if I'm being shunned by your church, and that's when God pulled me aside and he said, that's not me, man. I'll never forget it. God beginning to reveal himself in ways that I never could have seen in a church, all because I decided to leave. I thought my life was over based on everything I'd ever learned. I thought this is it. I'm done. And God said, "No, this is just the beginning. You're finally asking questions that you can't ask in a context like that." So I'm not speaking. I am angry about what religion does. I do not hate people who were involved in religious organizations. I do not. I hate what it's doing to many of my friends, many who are in those environments. I hate watching it. I see defeat. I see shame. I see death. I see lack of fulfillment, lack of peace. I see anxiety. I see fear. And if you're hearing my voice and you're a friend of mine and you're in that, you fucking know what I mean. You're living it. You can deny it out of fear because you don't want to leave it. I get it. But you know, I'm talking to you and you see what God's done in my life. And the only thing that I can point to is that I finally said, I'm scrapping all this stuff. I'm not going to listen to man. I'm not going to buy into that anymore. And God, if you don't have something better to offer, then go ahead and take me out. I don't want to be here. And God started to show that. And he's shown his power. He's shown his love. He's done things that in spite of what I've had to share with my family, my kids, my wife now, things that are deeply shameful that, I mean, they should look at me with judgment. They don't, because they see what God can do. They're not impressed by my church attendance. They never were. Here I was trying to keep my kids in church, all these programs they needed to be a part of. And again, community and fellowship is great, but don't make yourself any cooler than an atheist who doesn't believe in God. They also value love, they value family, they value community. So quit trying to make your little religious organization somehow more impressive to God than anybody else. All I know is I was blind, I was miserable, I was unfulfilled, I was destroying myself. And all of this was in context of being a faithful, dutiful member of a religious organization. And when I finally got to the point where I had nothing left, in fact, nothing left to where I got kicked out of that environment, completely shunned, it wasn't until then that God started to show me, like, you never needed that in the first place. I'm going to start showing you great and mighty things that you've never known could be possible. And why am I not going to church? Well, I think I just answered that for you.